Welcome back to my channel. Today I'd like to talk to you about strategies for success as a buyer in New Jersey. If you're planning to buy a home in New Jersey, especially within an hour of New York City, and you think that step one is going to tour homes, just stop. So many buyers approach this backwards. They start with Zillow, going to open houses, and scrolling through listings the same way we scroll through Instagram, mindlessly. And then they wonder why they feel overwhelmed, nothing exactly feels right, and they keep losing homes in multiple bids. Successful buyers don't start with houses, they start with strategy. I'm going to walk you through the exact order that I recommend to clients after 13 plus years in the business. This will position you as strong and confident before you ever start to make offers. We're going to start with the step that everyone skips. Number one, talk to a lender, not just a calculator. The biggest mistake that I see buyers make at this point is relying on online calculators. So they're looking through listings on Zillow and they see the calculator at the bottom that determines affordability, but it's not taking into account any of their personal details. And believe me, your income, debt, credit score, and any assets you might have make a big difference in this process. So even if you're 6 to 12 months out, it's really not too early to start talking to a lender who's familiar with the local market. They can have a conversation with you before they ever start the actual pre-approval process, but then it will give you a real idea of a range of purchase price and of tax amount that you should be taking into your search. A lot of my clients actually qualify for more than they'd ever want to spend. Just because they approve for a maximum amount doesn't necessarily mean that that monthly payment fits their lifestyle. So once you have clarity, especially with a professional, the whole beginning of your search feels a lot easier. Step number two, a strategy consultation with a local real estate expert. I've talked about this before, and I will link my previous video in the description, but New Jersey isn't just one static market. It's made up of many micro markets. One town could be so very different from the town next door in terms of listing strategy and market standards in multiple offer guidelines. Those are things you want to have an idea of before you start to look. Let me give you an example. There are some towns in New Jersey where the market standard introduces a house to the market at 30 to 50% lower than what it will trade for. So if you're a buyer who's only looking at new listings on Zillow or any of the sites, and you're just looking at list prices, but not at closed sales, you might not know that. And it would give you an overinflated idea of what your budget would equal in that town. This is where a local expert comes in handy even early on in your search, so that you can strategically come up with a number of towns that would match your lifestyle criteria as well as your price point. Just that one step can give you so much clarity as you begin your home search. That's why I recommend this consultation happen before you ever begin touring homes. Your goal isn't just to see houses, but it's to build context into your search. You should be discussing your lifestyle priorities, your commute tolerance, schools, walkability, space that you want, whether you'd like an older home or newer construction, your appetite for renovation. A local expert should be able to recommend towns that aren't just popular or ones that you might have heard of, but towns that align with how you actually want to live. It should also help you to understand some trade-offs, because almost every home purchase involves some kind of trade-off. You might get more space, but a longer commute, lower taxes, but fewer of the amenities you're interested in, a very charming older home, but more maintenance that you'll be responsible for. It's better to understand as many of these as possible before you start emotionally investing. So, my suggestion is to narrow your search to 5 towns. It could be 3 or even 2, but the more that you give yourself to explore as you begin to start looking at houses, the better off you'll be in this very competitive seller's market. Step 3, tour homes strategically, not emotionally. I really recommend that my clients see homes with me first before they start going to open houses. Of course, they can go to open houses alone whenever they so desire, but popular houses can be very crowded during open house times. They can be noisy, it can feel more pressurized, and it can give you a sense of urgency. Also, if you haven't started working with an agent, every single agent will require you to sign in. I say this to you not because I don't do it. I absolutely do. My sellers would want to know who's coming through the open houses. But it's also a sales tactic, and I have converted many buyers from open houses. Some people are less successful than that, but almost everyone will add you to their email list, and you will start to be bombarded. Another important reason that I like to tour houses first with clients before they start going to visit them alone is that it can be easy to miss important details when you're in an open house environment. After 13 years in the business, I immediately notice certain things that my buyers don't catch. Those could be layout inefficiencies, decisions that I would not have made during renovations, signs of deferred maintenance, things that I would consider red flags impacting your resale eventually, and issues that can be invisible in photos. I like to help buyers understand why a house is priced the way it is and also what potential compromises are being made. So, what really matters versus what's cosmetic. After a few showings together, buyers feel much more confident. And even when they do go to open houses alone, if they're really interested in a house, I will then go visit it with them again. This is what you should expect from a real estate specialist in the area. You should know what to look for and what questions to ask. And in this situation, you're much less likely to be swayed just by your emotions. Step 4, making a winning offer. Now, before we discuss price and terms, the first thing I like to discuss with my clients when they've decided that they really love a house are the comparable sales within the last 12 months. And not just any sales within the town. They have to be similar both in number of bedrooms and bathrooms, size of lot, neighborhood, level of renovation in the home, and even square footage, which is a data point that you can't see on listings easily. I have to dig down into the tax records to find it, but it's very helpful in determining the true size of a home. So once we've discussed the comparable sales and made a strategy for pricing, then we can look at the multiple offer guidelines. Most desirable homes in desirable locations are receiving multiple offers right now. And so listing agents very often collaborate with their sellers and publish multiple offer guidelines. These will include language that they're looking to see about home inspections, appraisals, closing date, potential leasebacks. We'll talk about that in a second. Let's start with price. So we've discussed purchase price, but not how it works in terms of full down payment and deposit amount. Those are not the same things. So if you're taking a mortgage on a property, there will be a down payment associated with that mortgage. Let's say it's standard 20% down with 80% financed. Now, there are some people who put the 20% down as a deposit up front once you're under contract. But most of the time in this area, I see that is usually 10% of the purchase price with the balance at closing. In my opinion, that amount should be due at the end of the attorney review period, unless you have some of those funds in investments that need a little more time to become liquid. And we discuss that before we write the contract up so that all of the terms really match your expectations and your responsibility in terms of execution. The next most important part of the terms of an offer are language around inspections. Now, there is a standard phrase in our area that reads like this: buyers will limit home inspection to major structural, mechanical, environmental, and safety issues, if any. This came about in a very similar seller's market almost 20 years ago, where there was so much demand and so little inventory that there were agents in the marketplace advising their clients to bid high to win the multiple offers, but to gouge the sellers later during inspections. And in New Jersey, this timeline from when your offer is accepted until you actually start negotiating inspections can be up to 2 weeks long. So by the time the sellers got to negotiating inspections and realized that the buyers were going to be unreasonable, trying to get back some of the money that they overbid with, most of the other buyers who were there during the multiple offers will have already disappeared because of that timeline. We can talk about that in a second. So this language became very popular, and it's meant to convey that the buyer will not nitpick. So I'm talking about changing out an outlet or making sure there's a GFCI outlet, which is for bathrooms and kitchens or anywhere where water could be present. Those are very small fixes that really shouldn't be part of the inspection contingency. So the language is meant to show that. However, from an attorney's perspective, this language is very subjective. What does major really mean? I remember an attorney came into my first office and gave us a whole presentation about this and said, we understand that you like to use this language, but let me tell you why it's detrimental to the transaction. I currently am negotiating inspections on a property where the seller thinks that major is $10,000 and the buyer thinks that major is $1,000. How will we cross that delta? So a long time ago, actually, I started adding a waiver amount to this language. You've heard the phrase already, but I'll do it again. Buyers will limit home inspection to major structural, mechanical, and environmental issues, if any, and waive the first X number of dollars should any issues arise. This does two things. It defines major, right? Now we know major means let's use $5,000, okay? Major structural, mechanical, environmental, and safety issues. So it's defined major. It also has protected you. So I never recommend that buyers waive inspections completely unless they're a contractor buying a property that they want to either demolish or completely gut renovate. But the average buyer coming to me who's either first time or maybe second time home buyer, I don't want them to waive the whole inspection. That's a scary proposition. I want them to know what they're getting into before they close. So this waiver actually acts kind of like a deductible. You know how a deductible works on car or health insurance, right? So if we do inspections and we find that there's nothing wrong with the house, this will never come into play. But if we do find some larger items, right, major items that are wrong with the house that need remedy, you just have to know that that waiver amount, you're going to be negotiating above it, okay? So let's say we find a foundation crack that needs a structural engineer to come and draw plans and potentially them to put in rebar into the cement. These are expensive items. That could be a $25,000 fix, as an example. If you had a $5,000 waiver, that means you would be negotiating for a $20,000 credit. We're going to get into credits in a minute because there's a lot of misconceptions around this as well. In any case, I talk to buyers about the types of repairs that could come up and what they feel comfortable with in terms of a waiver amount. This is a very strong term that could end up costing the buyer nothing, but gives the seller confidence that they won't be taken for a ride. So I talked for a moment about how that would work at closing. I just want to tell you all now, this is something that comes up a lot for me. The seller can never give the buyer a check at closing. So if you're asking for a credit amount, and often that is what's happened, either the seller doesn't have time to make the repairs or you actually prefer to do your own repairs. Hint, hint, that's what I suggest. Then you have control over whom you're hiring and what kind of a job they're doing. So that means that we have to negotiate something for you to be able to do those repairs. And the easiest way to do this is to negotiate a credit against your closing costs. That's the easiest way for it to equal cash for you. It means that whatever that amount is, and it can't be higher than your closing costs, that's an important one, then you have to bring that much less to closing because that'll be going towards your closing costs. See how it kind of equals cash? Now, if it's an issue that's larger than your closing costs, you have two options. Either the seller can do the repair, or it can be a reduction in the purchase price. However, if it's taken off the purchase price, it means it's also amortized over the length of your loan. So that small reduction in monthly cost on your payment may not equal the amount that you need to make those repairs. Anyway, I bring this up because I think it's something buyers should know from the get-go, that there are a lot of ways that this can be negotiated, but it's not as obvious a fix as you might think. Okay, so inspection language is done. The next important term is appraisal language. In so many of these towns where agents are strategically underpricing homes to drive competition, it means that the house will most likely sell significantly above the purchase price. And in doing that, they are garnering more interest in the buying public, but they're also protecting the seller against any potential shortfall in the appraisal. So let's use some real numbers here. Let's say that the house is priced at $1.1 million and your offer is $1.25 million. That means that the difference between the listing price and the purchase price is $150,000. Now, there are instances where my buyers waive that total difference. Maybe that's because they have enough cash to cover the difference, or because they have enough, they're putting down enough that they can restructure their loan. Or they're not making up the total amount. They're saying that they would cover a shortfall in the appraisal up to $50,000. That's an option. But because there are so many people interested in the same house, this is a very important term because the sellers can ask for this. It's language that you should be aware of because it's going to come up. Now, timing and flexibility are also very important in offers. Most of the time, the seller will specify their desired closing date. Hopefully, you can be flexible to meet it because that is an important term. If the sellers are looking for a quick closing, it means that you need to have a lender who is primed and ready and able to close quickly, and an agent who understands the urgency of that because there are many different factors going into the timeline of closing. Or the seller could want to close later or potentially close and then lease back the property from you. This is happening quite a bit in New Jersey right now, where a seller will say, I want a 30 to 45 day closing, but I'd like a lease back for a month. Now, this gives the buyer some opportunities. You can negotiate a rental amount to be paid to you by the sellers. However, in very competitive multiple offer situations, I often will have buyers who waive this first month for the sellers. That's really becomes a valuable proposition for the seller because they could be paying, let's say, up to $10,000. It depends on the price of the home because it reflects your cost as the buyer of holding the property for a month. But it's supposed to represent your mortgage payment, taxes, and insurance for the time that they will be in the property. So let's say that you close on August 1st and they want a lease back until September 1st. Now, when you make your first payment at closing with your closing costs, very often you don't get a mortgage invoice for 30 to 45 days. So sometimes it's worth it to buyers to add this extra bonus for the sellers to give them that first month free because you wouldn't be paying your mortgage again anyway. You're paying it at closing. So this can be like a bonus term if you're willing and able and they're asking for it. The other thing I like to include is especially if they don't tell us an exact date, I like to say, okay, we would close 30 days after the conclusion of attorney review, but flexible to the seller's needs, right? This is important, this flexibility. It gives you a leg up over someone who maybe has a contingent sale. We'll talk about that in another video. Or someone who really has a very strict timeline that they have to be in the house. Other terms that you should consider have to do with lead-based paint requirements. You'll also want to discuss with your agent the lead-based paint requirements if the house was built before 1978. Any language about fireplace, chimney, and flue, which in this area is almost always specified that it's trading as is. This became a market standard because there are so few regulations in the inspection world. So people can get their license to inspect a fireplace, chimney, and flue. But after that, there are very few requirements that have to be met and really no one policing this. So we see very often in the market that chimney inspectors often have their own repair companies. You can see how this can be problematic. Yes. And so many deals were falling apart based on these overinflated estimates for repairs to chimneys, flues, or fireplaces that the real estate market just took this out of the equation. I'm seeing that more and more also in relation to sewer line inspections, which I very much hope will not join fireplace, chimney, and flues because I have found many sewer lines that need very significant work, but it's an inspection that you should have there. And hopefully the seller isn't asking for it to be accepted as is because I really want you to inspect the sewer line. Now, all of these decisions should support making your offer attractive and you should feel very comfortable with them. That's why I like to talk about them up front, so you're not surprised and only hearing about them the day that you're writing up your offer. Let's go back over the winning order. Number 1, talk to a lender and understand your real numbers. Number 2, consult with a local real estate expert and narrow down the towns that make sense for you based on your lifestyle, price point, and appetite for dealing with some of these inspection language issues we've discussed. Number 3, tour strategically and learn what matters before emotions take over. And number 4, build an offer that wins on more than price. Most buyers think this process starts with houses, but buyers who succeed start with preparation. If you're considering buying in New Jersey and you'd like help building this plan before the pressure really hits, I am always happy to have this conversation. Best results in real estate don't come from luck. They come from strategy, and you need a strategic partner. If you'd like to discuss more with me personally, you can make an appointment through the Calendly link that's down in the description. Thank you. See you next time.